So I was watching the X Zone TV channel last night when I was abducted by aliens, and they kept repeating to me over and over again, simultv.com, simultv.com.
What's simultv.com?
That's what I asked them. They had it written on the side of their UFO.
How do you spell that?
UFO.
No, I mean simultv.com.
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 Right. simultv.com.
Interesting that you were abducted by aliens in a simultv.com UFO last night.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah. Now that you mention it, I remember now last night I was awakened from a deep sleep. My great-grandmother was standing there. She said she'd come from the hereafter to tell me about simultv.com. She even spelled it out for me.
simultv.com, sonny boy.
simultv.com.
simultv.com, sonny boy.
Wow.
Yeah.
Guys, you'll never guess what my psychic guru just told me.
simultv.com.
Exactly. Are you guys psychic too?
Of course.
We all know about simultv.com. simultv.com.
Roswell in the 21st century is a detailed re-examination of the Roswell UFO crash case. I have studied the evidence for more than 30 years, and I now put that evidence under a microscope in a cold case examination of the facts. These facts might not please everyone. They are based on my comprehensive investigation that took years to complete, but they do lead to the conclusion that whatever fell was not built on Earth. The best of Project Blue Book is based on the 22-year-long investigation conducted by the Air Force. But the book goes far beyond that, bringing in evidence that was uncovered long after Project Blue Book was ordered terminated. Using facts that were unavailable to the Air Force investigators, I was able to prove that the Air Force manipulated the data and drew unrealistic conclusions about the UFO sightings reported to them. My different perspective shows there was more to Project Blue Book than even the Air Force knew. Both books are available at Amazon.com.
Join Patty Conklin and Healing Within Radio each week. More than entertainment, Healing Within offers educational, useful tools for everyday life. Listen for help overcoming fear, anxiety, and depression. Patty knows about eliminating cancer, MS, dementia, Parkinson's, and a host of illnesses that we face every day. Life can be good. Life is good. All you need are simple tools to start changing your life. Start right now by visiting pattyconklin.com, PATTICONKLIN. No matter where you are in the world, you can work with Patty through Skype, phone, or in person, visiting one of her retreats in Georgia. Visit pattyconklin.com today or call our offices at 404-474-0086. That's pattyconklin.com or call 404-474-0086.
The X Zone Radio Show with Rob McConnell is largely an opinion talk show. All opinions, comments, or statements of fact expressed by Rob McConnell's guests are strictly their own and are not to be construed as those of the X Zone Radio Show or endorsed in any manner by Rob McConnell, rel-mar McConnell Media Company, the X Zone Broadcast Network, its affiliated networks, stations, employees, or advertisers.
All Hit Radio.
Welcome to the X Zone, a place where fact is fiction and fiction is reality. Now, here's your host, Rob McConnell.
And good evening, one and all. Welcome to another edition of the X Zone. I am Rob McConnell, coming to you from our broadcast center and studios in Crystal Beach, Ontario, Canada. If you'd like to send me an email, xzone at xzoneradiotv.com, on all social media sites, X Zone Radio TV. And if you'd like to see the broadcast schedule for the X Zone Broadcast Network, visit www.xzbn.net. And to watch the X Zone TV channel that is exclusive to SimulTV, visit www.simultv.com. But during the coronavirus pandemic, We have the channel available 7/24, 365 with our compliments and the compliments of Simul TV at xzonetvchannel.com. My guest for this 2-hour segment is Kevin Randle, and Kevin is the host of A Different Perspective on the X Zone Broadcast Network. And Kevin talks about UFOs. He's talked about, the crash at Roswell, the crash at Corona. He's talked about the Bermuda Triangle. And what I thought I'd do is I'd bring Kevin on so that we could try and make some semblance of the myths, the legends, and the truth behind ufology. Joining me now is Kevin Randle. And Kevin, welcome back to the X Zone.
Well, it's about time, Rob. Haven't spoken with you for literally minutes.
Yes, that's right, Kevin. First of all, Kevin, tell our listeners a little bit about yourself. They may be brand new to the channel and the network, and they're probably saying, well, who is Kevin Randle? Is he the guy that writes all the books?
Yes, he is. I think the most important thing is I'm retired military. Mm-hmm. I spent 22 years in both on active duty and reserve and guard. Have a tour as a helicopter pilot, aircraft commander in Vietnam, a tour as an intelligence officer in Iraq, and retired as lieutenant colonel. I've been studying the UFO phenomena for much longer than I care to talk about. I've written, I think it's now 27 books on the topic, starting with something called the UFO Case Book back in 1989, and the latest book is The Best of Project Blue Book, which is a re-examination of some of the better cases in the Project Blue Book files. I have a PhD in psychology. I attended the University of Iowa, American Military University, and have literally talked to practically everybody in the UFO field at some time or another. And I cannot believe when I go back through my files that some of the people I've actually had an opportunity to chat with in the past.
Kevin, what was it that drew you into the UFO phenomenon?
I suspect it was science fiction. My mother was a big science fiction fan. She actually took me to see Earth versus the Flying Saucers when I was a little tiny kid. Mm-hmm. And science fiction, of course, deals with alien visitation and interstellar flight and alien civilizations.
Right.
And ufology deals with interstellar flight and alien visitation and alien civilization. So it wasn't a great step from science fiction into UFOs, but it also seemed a way that we could kind of short circuit some of the technological problems we faced. If we had access to their knowledge, then we wouldn't have to go through all the experimentation and the trouble of developing it ourselves. It would kind of be handed to us, which is probably not the best way to do it, but it certainly was a way to get us into space a lot quicker.
All right. Based on your experience and the number of years that you've been investigating the phenomena, the number of books that you've read, the number of people you've read, the number of speaking engagements that you have been invited to, the number of radio and TV shows that you've been on, in your opinion, what are UFOs? What are these things that people keep reporting to different authorities, but never seem to be able to get the smoking gun to please the public?
95%, at least 95% of the sightings are of mundane objects. Meteors misunderstood, aircraft seen at bizarre angles, weather phenomena that's not understood. The planet Venus, for crying out loud, and it's just unbelievable the number of people who see Venus, especially when it's closest to Earth and at its brightest, don't realize that that's Venus.
Right.
So a lot of it is explainable in that. When we get down to the core of cases that are not easily explainable. Mm-hmm. And I think the best explanation, at least in my mind, is probably extraterrestrial. I say probably. There are other explanations, time travelers, which I think is a more fun explanation, but probably very unlikely.
Right.
Interdimensional, that sort of thing. The problem is, as you say, we do not have the smoking gun. I can say to you, in the Roswell case, for example, I can say to you that we have explained all the terrestrial explanations offered for it. We know it wasn't any of those things. There is no terrestrial explanation for the Roswell case. Is that sufficient to take us to the next step to it being extraterrestrial? For me, unfortunately, no, it's not. some people, that's great. We can't explain it in the mundane terms. We have all these eyewitnesses.
Yeah.
That's great. Let's run with that. I want something more. And the real problem with the Roswell case, and I explored this in the book Roswell in the 21st Century, is that a lot of the witnesses turned out not to be credible, that the case is not nearly as robust as it was 30 years ago when Don Schmidt and I published our first book about it. We've learned so much more about what happened there and what was going on that we, at least in my mind, we've eliminated some of the best evidence, the best testimony for the Roswell case. That being said, it is inexplicable in terrestrial terms in today's environment. And again, does that mean it's extraterrestrial? No, it means we just haven't found a terrestrial solution that fits all the known facts about the case.
There seems to be a lot of controversy about the Roswell case. Witnesses seem to change their stories. There's a lot of deathbed testimony that's given out. But there doesn't seem to be anything that anyone who knows nothing about UFOs can actually look at and say, geez, this is the real McCoy. I look at what Jesse Marcel did as the base intelligence officer. He goes out to the Brazel Ranch, gets all this so-called evidence, puts it in his Jeep, and instead of bringing it back to the base to maintain the chain of custody, he brings it home and lets his kid play with it.
Well, that's not quite a fair characterization. He puts it in his car.
Yeah.
Cabot already went back to the base with the Jeep, and he wanted to show it to his son because he thought it was something very extraordinary.
But doesn't that go against military training? Doesn't that show a lapse in the protocol?
Yes, absolutely. But here's the other side of that coin. Back in 1947, the atomic bomb was classified. The size and the shape of the atomic bomb was classified.
Right.
I don't know what kind of information they expected the Soviets or anybody else to gain from knowing what it looked like. For those who want to look it up on the line, it's an MK3 atomic bomb. That's what they had. Jesse Jr. asked his dad what the atomic bomb looked like, and his father drew him a picture of it and showed him.
But why? Why would he do that?
Violating security regulations.
So how come he was allowed to get away with that? And if that is the case, Kevin, why does anybody in their right mind put any credibility into what this person says?
He shared it with his son.
So?
He didn't share it with anybody else. And once he had drawn the picture of the atomic bomb and Jesse Jr. got a chance to look at it, he destroyed it. He burned it.
But does that make it right?
No, absolutely not. Absolutely not. He shouldn't have done that. And he should not have brought the stuff home because they didn't know exactly what it was. But I think that's the point. They didn't know exactly what they had. They found something that they couldn't readily identify. And so he wanted his son to participate in seeing this strange, interesting thing that had happened.
You know what? When I was a cop, I never brought a criminal home for my kids to see the criminal before I brought him to jail.
Oh, I get it. And I know stuff that I saw when I was an intelligence officer that I never discussed with my wife or anybody else. We were on a at an Air Force base, and they had a museum, and there was a room that you had to have a top secret clearance to get into. And I got in because I'd had one. They took me in, and I never really discussed what I saw in there because it was classified top secret, even though there was some really neat stuff in there. So I get what you're saying, and it's perfectly sensible. But I think the problem here is we're talking about the dynamic between a father and a son that maybe you and I don't completely understand. That specific dynamic between the Marcel.
I'm sorry. I don't buy it. I really don't. You know, if you take an oath to do something, and if you break that oath, and if you think that because you've broken that oath and it becomes common knowledge and you purport that what you saw and what you did was the truth, you have no credibility.
And I understand that point of view completely and totally. And I look at the Marcels and I think of it in one way. But the real point is we still don't know if it was alien. We really don't know what was going on. It is clear that Jesse Marcel Sr. brought stuff home and showed it to his son.
All right, stand by, my friend. You and I have to take our commercial break. X-Zone Nation, Kevin Randle is my special guest. And Kevin and I will be back on the other side of this break as we continue here in the X-Zone with yours truly, Rob McConnell, from our broadcast center and studios at Crystal Beach, Ontario, Canada. Don't go away. Are you looking for psychic services that empower as well as provide accurate information? Jenny is a third-generation psychic with extensive esoteric training. A practicing professional intuitive for over 30 years, her accuracy is astounding. While most psychics can read what will happen to you if you don't change directions, Jenny understands the future is subjective. While there is a river of time we all traverse, that river has many waves, eddies, currents, and tributaries from which to choose. With Jenny as your guide, you can explore the many possible outcomes in the river of time and navigate your course to the one of your liking. Take control of your future. Book your life-changing session with Jenny today at www.gen-e.net. That's www.gen-e.net.
Mission Evolution is dedicated to the well-being of the planet and animals, as well as the evolution of humankind. One major factor threatening all three is increasing toxicity. Heavy metals and other environmental toxins are poisoning our bodies, deteriorating our brains, blocking our spiritual connection, and shortening our lives. Yet these poisons are extremely difficult to remove. I'm Gwilda Wiyaka, and I recently became aware of a product created from the marriage of nature and nanotechnology called Vitality. It's formulated from zoolite, whose crystalline structure binds toxins, gently carrying them out of the body. The light is only as clear as the window through which it shines. Clear your body, shine your light into the world. Visit vitalityhappens.com for a 20% discount. Enter code PATHHOME.
In the mid-1990s, I was approached by a young woman who believed she'd been abducted by alien creatures. In conversations, I began a journey that took me not into the world of interstellar travel, but back through time into past lives. Under hypnotic regression administered by a professional rather than describing abduction, Jenny, as she is called, begins to tell a tale of horror in 19th century London. Her unbelievable past life seems to connect with Jack the Ripper and other monsters of the past. Throughout the session, Jenny provides a rich detail of her past lives that links some of the most horrific killers in history to one another. Using the resources of a university library in the pre-internet's day, I was able to verify some of Jenny's claims. She has knowledge that wasn't readily available to a suburban housewife. Does this prove the reality of her tales? Conversations attempts to answer that and other provocative questions. Conversations is available at Amazon.com.
Welcome back, everyone. Kevin Randle is our special guest. Kevin, what's your website for our people who can go and check you out and buy some of your books from your website as well, of course?
Well, linked to Amazon, of course, but the web is www.kevinrandle.blogspot.com, and the latest stuff is mostly about the Bermuda Triangle and Flight 19, but we'll be getting into more UFO stuff here pretty soon.
All right. Before we went to the break, we were talking about Jesse Marcel and the Roswell case. And, this is why I wanted you to come on, Kevin, because you are credible. You are not one of these internet quarterbacks who thinks they know everything about UFOs because they've read it on the internet. You're one of the first and one of the most credible, if not the most credible, UFO investigator out there. And that's why I wanted you to come on, so that you can help me try and get a better handle on the world of ufology. Now, there are a lot of hucksters out there in the world of ufology. Billy Meyer, just to name one, and the list can go on and on and on. Then you've got the UFO cults, we've got the Raelians, we've got the Applegate gang, and so on and so forth. But when it comes to ufology itself, now it's all over the news because of the Tic Tac video footage that was shot by the United States Navy, over a period of three different times. What is your opinion of the naval Tic Tac footage?
We don't have very much in the way of footage. I personally don't know much about the technology of them acquiring that footage. I think back to 1952 when a Navy officer, Delbert Newhouse, took a 16 millimeter film of objects over Trenton, Utah, and the investigation done there. We're in a similar circumstance, very short piece of film, not a lot of detail on it, but I understand more about the acquisition of that kind of an image than something from a fighter's electronics in today's environment. But we don't have a lot of stuff from them, and there's any number of technological glitches, I think, that they create problems with those sorts of images on the video that we see. And I'm not sure those have been completely and totally explored. I also look at the descriptions given by the pilots who have witnessed these things, apparently independently of what they've acquired on their heads-up displays and the other recording instruments. And they're talking about something that might be the size of a suitcase. So we're clearly not talking about an extraterrestrial craft here.
Right.
We're talking about something else. And I also see that they're talking about the possibility of being drones and unmanned aircraft that might be penetrating these practice areas that they use exclusively. So there are alternative explanations that get us into the terrestrial, but we don't have enough information to really make any kind of a intelligent guess about what was seen, because the information is being leaked piecemeal into the mainstream media, and we've all seen how reliable the mainstream media is into this day and age. So we have some real problems in that arena. We have some trouble with the provenance or the credibility of some of the people who leaked the material into the mainstream media as well. So we've got a lot of problems with this thing. And I would like to see more information, and I know there are people who are trying to gather that information. John Greenwald, couldn't remember his first name. John Greenwald has spent months and months in FOIA requests trying to gather additional information, and he's kind of on the outs now in the UFO community because he's not a great proponent of the Tic Tac videos. But I kind of joined John on that we just don't have enough information to make any really credible identification of what it is, and we need a lot more information. And the suggestion is that information exists in the Navy archive somewhere, but it's classified and we can't get at it.
In your opinion, what is the case that you have investigated that comes closest to bringing the truth about UFOs to light?
A complex question. If you'd asked me this question 10, 15 years ago, I'd probably said Roswell.
Right.
But I think in today's environment, and I've said this, I think on my own program as well, that I think one of the better cases is Levelland, Texas, because we have multiple witnesses in at least 13 separate locations. We have law enforcement officers involved. Mm-hmm. We have the craft interacting with the environment, which means simply that it was stalling car engines, it was dimming headlights, it was filling radios with static, so there's some kind of field emitted by the craft that causes those sorts of things. We have the object then seen 2 hours later at White Sands Missile Range, and we have the statements of the military police who were involved in that sighting as well. So it's a case that provides us with a lot of different things. Now, the other thing that bothers me about this, and it's one of these deals where it's just missed opportunities. According to the family of the sheriff in Levelland, there was a burned area as well, a large circular burned area on one of the ranches. That information doesn't appear anywhere until after 2000. Don Burlinson, who's a UFO investigator from Roswell, as a matter of fact, was in Levelland. Roswell and Levelland are like 3 hours away from one another. And Don was there talking to the family of the sheriff, and they told him about this stuff, but they also said the sheriff was told not to talk about it. The Project Blue Book file suggests the sheriff never got more than 900 yards, closer than 900 yards, and all he saw was a red streak. And the family said, no, that's not true. He got much closer and saw something much more circular. I found a newspaper clipping where they had interviewed the sheriff within 48 hours of the sighting, where he actually did describe it as much closer and being circular in shape or disc-shaped. So we have that sort of thing going on. And had this been investigated properly in 1957 when it took place, we would be having a different discussion. I think another very good case is Lonnie Zamora's sighting from April of 1964. I was talking to Ben Moss and Tony Angiola on my radio program, and they said that other people than Lonnie Zamora had seen the thing in the sky before Lonnie Zamora reported it to the police headquarters. And I asked them repeatedly, you saw the police logs, and never got a satisfactory answer from them. So I started looking into it and found a report written that very night by an Army officer who was involved in the initial investigation, a guy named Richard Holder. And he sent a report to the Pentagon, and in this short report, he mentioned these three people who had seen the object or heard the object as it flew over Socorro. Nobody ever tried to find them. And so we have these cases where Lonnie Zamora sees a craft on the ground. It leaves imprints on the ground, leaves a burned area on the ground. Mm-hmm. He sees beings associated with it. In one of the very few cases in the Project Blue Book files in which beings are reported, and the solution is not some kind of psychological aberration. So you have, again, multiple chains of evidence there, but it was never sufficiently explored. And I think that had the Air Force not been so busy arguing with Don Kehoe, who was the director of the National Investigations Committee on Aerial Phenomena, a civilian organization, had they not been so busy arguing at each other about the number of witnesses, we might have had an opportunity to gather more and proper evidence. But the thing is, the agendas of everybody gets in the way, and that's one of the real problems with the UFO field is, what's your personal agenda? I want to be the number one UFO guy, so I'm going to embrace everything, regardless how ludicrous it is. I want to be the scientific guy, so I'm going to reject some of the stuff because I don't like the tone of the guy who was giving us the information. And the personal agendas sometimes get in the way of the investigations, where we should all be cooperating, because the real mission is to find out, are UFOs alien spacecraft? Is there some kind of natural phenomenon we don't completely understand? Mm-hmm. Is there a psychological phenomenon we don't completely understand? When I was doing my PhD dissertation, I did it on the identification of ambiguous stimuli based on belief structures. And what I learned was, if you saw a light in the sky and you believed in ghosts, that's how you identified it. And if you believed in alien spacecraft, that's how you identified it. And no real research has been done to eliminate those sorts of cases as well, and how belief structure may influence an identification of something strange in the sky.
Something that has baffled me ever since I've started talking to people about UFOs, going back 30 years when we first started broadcasting this show, is that if a civilian aircraft or a military aircraft does not have its navigational beacons on, you can't see it at night. Am I correct?
For the most part, yes.
Okay. So how do people see these UFOs at night? Do the UFOs actually comply with FAA regulations and use navigational beacons on their craft?
No, but they use lights. And Philip Klass has said repeatedly, and it's a great line, if the UFOs don't want to be seen and they're supposedly being somewhat stealthy up there, then they could just turn the damn lights off. At night, you can see airplanes. If you're at the right angle, you can sometimes see the jet exhaust or and that sort of thing. Yeah. But the UFOs often have their own series of lights on them, as is reported by the witnesses.
You and I have to take our break for the news. Kevin, please stand by. Always great talking to you, my friend. X-Zone Nation, if you'd like to find out more about our guest this hour, the one and only Kevin Randle, listen to his show. It's heard daily here on the X-Zone Broadcast Network. Go to our website, xzbn.net. Look at the schedule, find out when Kevin is on, and you can listen to Kevin. And if you go to his blogspot, which is kevinrandle.blogspot.com, you can find out more about Kevin and the great articles and books that he has available for you. This is the X-Zone. I am Rob McConnell. I'll be back on the other side of this break. Whatever you do, do not, I repeat, do not go away.
How would your life change if you could develop the business and personal skills that you need in order to make more money? Do you want to learn how to achieve your big life goals faster? Then go to findhiddenmoney.com and get the Goal for It online course. The course teaches you how you can set and achieve your biggest goals while completely overcoming the roadblocks to your goals so that you can realize your dreams and imagine more success. Go to findhiddenmoney.com.
If you are looking for a safe, zero-calorie natural option to the harmful artificial sweeteners on the market today, Just Like Sugar is what you're looking for. Just Like Sugar is a wonderful natural alternative for those health-conscious people who choose a calorie-restricted diet with a great, pure, sweet flavor that tastes just like sugar. Just Like Sugar is a great natural option for people suffering from diabetes and may be useful in restricted diet programs where standard sugars are not allowed and does not cause a laxative effect of some other sweeteners. Just Like Sugar comprises a perfect blend of chicory root fiber, natural calcium, natural vitamin C, and Just Like Sugar's sweetness comes from the natural flavors from the peel of the orange. Just Like Sugar is a natural alternative to harmful artificial sweeteners and will change the way that you believe all natural sweetener products taste. Just Like Sugar is available at your local Whole Foods markets, Wild Oats markets, Henry's, Sun Harvest, and many other fine natural food stores in the U.S., Canada, and worldwide. Audience, if you have seen a UFO, had a close encounter, seen a ghost, Bigfoot, lake monster, or a story that you would like to share or have investigated, contact me, Rob McConnell, by sending me your email to xzone@xzoneradiotv.com, or you can call toll-free 1-800-610-7035, extension 143, and on Skype, X-Zone Radio TV. For more information on the X-Zone Radio TV show with yours truly, Rob McConnell, visit www.xzoneradiotv.com or www.xzonetvchannel.com or simultv.com and xzbn.net. Until next we meet here in the X-Zone from our broadcast center and studios in Hamilton, Ontario, Canada, always remember, X-Zone Nation, keep your eyes to the sky and your heart in the light.
Memorable dynamic presentations are a not-so-secret weapon in the business world. Do you have a powerful message that must be shared, but you haven't found a way to deliver that message? Do you want to be known as a top public speaker who gets amazing results? Are you ready to create and deliver your powerful message? Thomas Hides can help you create and deliver your speech to get the results you desire. Visit iconquality.com.
And welcome back, everyone. This is the X-Zone. I am Rob McConnell. www.xzoneradiotv.com is our website, and for all the programming on the X-Zone Broadcast Network, xzbn.net. Kevin Randle is our guest. Kevin is the host of the a very popular show on the X-Zone Broadcast Network. It's A Different Perspective. And Kevin can be heard 7 days a week on the network. Just go to xzbn.net, look for his show, A Different Perspective, find out when, on which day that you'd like to listen to it, and away you go. His blogspot is www.kevinrandle.blogspot.com. Kevin, I'd just like to go back in time, talk about time travel to the Roswell case. And you know, you and I were discussing during the news that if Jesse Marcel was the only person involved, and if he had done what he did, then we could kind of discount it. But there were other people involved who also, according to them, shared some evidence.
There were a number of people on Colonel Blanchard's staff, the senior officers in Roswell in 1947, who shared some of the information with us. And I think it's important to understand, if, as you say, if Jesse Marcel was standalone, we could easily reject his tale as something else. One of the most credible people was Major Edwin Easley, who retired as a colonel. And he was always very careful in what he said to me. And I always got the impression that he took his oath back in 1947. and he still lived by that oath. He wanted to help, but he didn't want to violate his oath. And so I would ask him questions, and he would tell me, and I have it on tape, so you can hear him say it. He said, "Well, I can't talk about that. I was sworn to secrecy." But if I could phrase the question properly, or didn't relate specifically to something that he felt was classified, he'd help me out. One of the things he said, for example, is that Mac Brazel, the rancher who found the debris in his field and alerted the 509th to it, was held in the guest house on the base. Mac Brazel complained to neighbors, and we talked to any number of those who talked about that he'd been held in jail for a number of days, something like 4 or 5, maybe a week in Roswell. Well, Edwin Ely said he was held in the guest house. Well, if the door's locked and you can't go out, that's kind of like being in jail, but it kind of corroborates a little bit of what Mac Brazel had said. Ely's only comment to me was, at one point I asked him, "Are we following the right path?" And Ely said, "What do you mean?" And I said, "Well, we think it was extraterrestrial." And he said, "Well, let me put it this way, it's not the wrong path." And that's about as far as he would go. But I mean, here was a very, I think, honorable man who wanted to maintain his
integrity and his oath.
Yeah, and his honor.
Yeah.
But he wanted to help us as well, and he didn't want to lie to me about it. And I think part of that was because I was also a former military officer. But there are a number of other people who did similar things. And so, it's hard to reject the Roswell case based simply on that. If you want to take it in another direction, I can point to any number of people who gave us wonderful stories about being involved in the Roswell case, and we have since learned that their testimony is no good. One of those being Glenn Dennis, the Roswell mortician. Gave us a wonderful story about a nurse that he was dating, and she was involved in the autopsy, and she drew what the aliens looked like for him, and then burned the scrap of paper. And several days later, she was transferred off the base and was killed in an aircraft accident. Couldn't verify any of that.
Speaking about Tom Carey, you had him on your show last week, and it got a little confusing because, you wanted to go one way with the conversation, and Tom kept on going a totally different way. And I was listening to it, and what was wrong with Tom?
I think the problem, Tom is a true believer. And I don't say that in a pejorative sense. I just mean he believes that the evidence is very persuasive that Roswell was extraterrestrial. And he wants to hang on to at least part of the Glenn Dennis story. Even if Glenn Dennis wasn't directly involved, Glenn Dennis heard it from somebody who was directly involved. And he wants to hang on to that. And if you kind of question that, he gets very defensive. And I tried to press him a little bit on some of that. I didn't want it to get too confusing to the listeners, however. And the one thing that we have to point out is he provides no real documentation. He talks about their book that's coming out on June 15th, which, again, goes back to the missing nurse, the Glenn Dennis nurse. And they've got, I think, a third name for her. It originally was Naomi Self, and then it was Naomi Sipes, and now it's something else. And it wasn't a military nurse, it was a civilian nurse. And she wasn't killed in a plane crash. And I'm thinking, how many lies do you get before you say, this is one too many? And Tom, I think, wants to preserve part of the Glenn Dennis testimony. I had Don Schmidt on the show, and I asked him the same question about the missing nurse or Glenn Dennis, and he seemed to be more open to the idea that the Glenn Dennis testimony is virtually worthless in today's world. We know so much more about what transpired and how it transpired that I think Don's answer was a little bit more credible. But the thing was, when Tom listened to the Don Schmidt program, he sent me a long email about it, and he didn't agree with Don's assessment, which is why I brought Tom on to maybe provide us with a little bit more insight into that story. But I don't think he was successful in that. I pressed him a little bit on a problem with Walter Hott, who was the public affairs officer who issued the press release, and how his story had mushroomed after about 2000 to having seen the craft and the bodies, and providing us with witnesses to do that. We got Glenn Dennis from Walter Hott. There was another guy named Frank Kaufman we got from Walter Hott, and Kaufman turned out to be completely bogus. And so I'm thinking, if Walter Haut was on the inside of this thing, or at least on the periphery of it, he should have known that Kaufman wasn't involved at all. And yet he told us at one point that Don and I are standing on the sidewalk outside what used to be the SunWest Bank, I think, but now is a Wells Fargo Bank, right across from the Greyhound station, which is not there anymore. I say all this to put it in the time frame. And I asked him specifically about Kaufman, and he says, anything Kaufman tells you is golden. Well, it turns out it's not. It's
fool's gold.
Made out of lead. It's worthless. That worried me about that. I didn't press that point on Tom because I thought what I wanted to do on the program was talk more about Glenn Dennis and the nurse and not take it into something else that maybe should be explored at length later on.
Let me ask you this, Kevin. There are investigators, and then there are, in air quotes, investigators. Why would someone who claims to be an investigator, who writes about Roswell, who I would imagine would like the truth to get out there, not look at all the facts and cling on to a myth?
I can't really answer why Tom would do that. I know Tom is a very careful researcher. I know that he follows leads to the very end. He's very good at that. But sometimes you get to the point where you're interpreting the facts, and I think he overlooks some of the interpretations. He doesn't look at it from all angles. I try to look at it from all angles and try to figure out, could this be an explanation for this? Does it fit the facts as we know them? And Tom, the fact is Glenn Dennis lied repeatedly to us about the nurse and the story. And I reached the point where when he told us, when we found out that there was no Naomi Self in Roswell as a nurse in 1947 and confronted him with that information, he said, well, you guys asked me for a name. I told you at the time I wouldn't give you the real name, but here's a name for you. That was a complete and bogus lie. That was untrue. Never did he suggest he didn't give us the real name. And had he done so, I wouldn't have spent as much time and effort trying to find her that I did and everybody else did as well. And that was at the point I rejected Glenn Dennis completely and totally. Tom wants to cling to some of that, and he's got the little bits and pieces that he thinks fits into that story. And he can say, well, maybe Glenn wasn't directly involved, but he knew somebody who was, and maybe picked up their story and is giving it to us. He wants to cling to that missing nurse story, and I think it's just leading us down a primrose path.
Is it that he's trying to cling to the nurse story and the dentist story, or is he trying to cling to the fact that he truly believes beyond a shadow of a doubt, no matter what proof or evidence may arise, that Roswell was the location of crashed UFOs and there are extraterrestrial bodies that were removed and brought to undisclosed areas, including Area 51 or Wright-Patterson Air Force Base?
Well, actually, according to the information we got from General Exxon, one of the bodies went to Lowry Air Force Base, which at the time was the Army's mortuary service was there. That's a whole other argument. I hate to try to figure out where Tom is coming from.
No, listen, I'm not talking about Tom here. It seems that there are a number of investigators out there who believe the same thing that Tom and others in the field of ufology believe when it comes to Roswell. I didn't mean to single Tom out at this point of the conversation, but it seems that they don't want to change the story, because if the story changes, then it may not have happened, and if it may not have happened, the entire UFO field may be just a myth.
I think that's absolutely correct.
Yeah.
I think they feel that if Roswell wasn't extraterrestrial, then everything collapses around that. And that's really not true. We built Roswell up to the point where it seems to be the penultimate case. And if you can destroy Roswell, and there's people out there who want to destroy it just because they don't believe anything like this could ever happen, and it's not based on evidence either. It's the other side of the coin.
All right.
But I think they just want to cling to it, whatever it is.
All right, my friends, stand by. You and I have to take our final break for this hour. X Zone Nation, Kevin Randle is my guest. Kevin will be with me in the next hour. And if you'd like to find out more about Kevin, visit his website, www.kevinrandle.blogspot.com. sightings.com. I'll be back on the other side of this break. Don't go away.
So I was watching the X Zone TV channel last night when I was abducted by aliens, and they kept repeating to me over and over again, simultv.com, simultv.com.
What's simultv.com?
That's what I asked them. They had it written on the side of their UFO.
How do you spell that?
UFO.
No, I mean simultv.com.
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 Right. simultv.com.
Interesting that you were abducted by aliens in a simultv.com UFO last night.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah. Now that you mention it, I remember now last night I was awakened from a deep sleep. My great-grandmother was standing there. She said she come from the hereafter to tell me about simultv.com. She even spelled it out for me.
simultv.com, sonny boy.
simultv.com.
simultv.com, sonny boy.
Wow.
Yeah.
Guys, you'll never guess what my psychic guru just told me.
simultv.com.
Exactly. Are you guys psychic too?
Of course.
We all know about simultv.com. simultv.com.
What's making?
In the mid-1990s, I was approached by a young woman who believed she'd been abducted by alien creatures. In conversations, I began a journey that took me not into the world of interstellar travel, but back through time into past lives. Under hypnotic regression administered by a professional rather than describing abduction, Jenny, as she is called, begins to tell a tale of horror in 19th century London. Her unbelievable past life seems to connect with Jack the Ripper and other monsters of the past. Throughout the session, Jenny provides a rich detail of her past lives that links some of the most horrific killers in history to one another. Using the resources of a university library in the pre-internet day, I was able to verify some of Jenny's claims. She has knowledge that wasn't readily available to a suburban housewife. Does this prove the reality of her tales? Conversations attempts to answer that and other provocative questions. Conversations is available at Amazon.com.
Mission Evolution is dedicated to the well-being of the planet and animals, as well as the evolution of humankind. One major factor threatening all three is increasing toxicity. Heavy metals and other environmental toxins are poisoning our bodies, deteriorating our brains, blocking our spiritual connection, and shortening our lives. Yet these poisons are extremely difficult to remove. I'm Gwilda Wiyaka, and I recently became aware of a product created from the marriage of nature and nanotechnology called Vitality. It's formulated from zoolite, whose crystalline structure binds toxins, gently carrying them out of the body. The light is only as clear as the window through which it shines. Clear your body, shine your light into the world. Visit vitalityhappens.com for a 20% discount. Enter code PATHHOME.
Welcome back, everyone. This is the X Zone. I am Rob McConnell. www.xzoneradiotv.com is our show website. If you'd like to find out more about the X Zone Broadcast Network, visit www.xzbn.net. And for the X Zone TV channel, which plays 7/24, 365, and has great shows, including the X Zone, movies like War of the World, television shows like In Search Of, and some other great shows. In fact, there's even one with Kevin Randle debating Stephen Bassett that plays on the X Zone TV channel. Go to www.xzonetvchannel.com, where while we are in the middle of this coronavirus pandemic, thanks to my good friends at Simul TV, the feed is up and available 7/24, 365 with our compliments and those of Simul TV, our way of trying to help out during these very trying times. For more information on our guest this hour, Kevin Randle, www.kevinrandle.blogspot.com. Let me see here. Kevin, we were talking about the Roswell case.
Well, I was going to say, I think that we, as I mentioned before, we have people with agendas, and there are some people in the UFO field that can never be wrong. So whatever path they take, that's always the right path. And even when you present them with other evidence, they just ignore it. And I think specifically of Gerald Anderson, another one of these people who kind of came out of the Roswell case and talked about seeing the craft and the bodies as a young kid.
Mm-hmm.
And I pointed out to Stan Friedman that Anderson's story simply didn't work. And we could put some archaeologists on the plains of San Augustine where that craft was seen, working in what was called the Bat Cave. And I always kind of hesitate to say that because of the connotations in the comic book world, but the cave across the plains of San Augustine. And I said, these guys were there on July 1st, and we have documentation to prove that. They were there. And had this recovery operation the size Anderson talked about went on, they would have seen it. And Stan said to me, well, you don't know how deep they were in the cave, and you don't know what direction the cave faced. And I said, yes, we do. They were working on human habitation in the cave, so that wouldn't have been very deep in the cave because they wouldn't have the light for the inhabitants back in the old days to live in the cave. And their campsite was about 100 yards from the mouth of the cave because it was the only flat area around it that they could pitch their tents. And they had a panoramic view of the plains of San Augustine right to the point where Anderson said that the military operation was going on. So they would have seen it. And we talked to the guys who were there, and they said they saw nothing like that. But every time you'd bring something like that up, Stan, we just rejected out of hand. He just could not accept that Gerald Anderson had made the whole tale up, regardless of the evidence that we presented, suggesting his tale was completely and totally bogus. So you get the people who are so dead set on their point of view and their agenda that they're not going to look at the evidence. And that kind of clouds the whole thing and makes everything look bad as well.
Speaking about Stanton Friedman, what would Roswell, New Mexico be in the Roswell case if Stanton Friedman had not brought it to light? Would ufology be where it is today?
No, it would not. And I think the person that really brought it to light was Len Stringfield. With his crash retrieval tomes that he put out periodically, his monographs on that sort of thing. It was Len Stringfield who did that. The original book was done by Bill Moore and Charles Berlitz. And by the time Don Schmidt and I entered the investigation, Stan was busy chasing MJ-12. And so I fear that it was Don and I who kind of steered people back to the Roswell case, and it just sort of exploded out of there. I mean, our book was published in 1991. I appeared on the Unsolved Mysteries program, and Stan did as well, about the Roswell case. And Don and I had spent a lot of time in Roswell talking to the witnesses, the people who were around the case at the time, and doing what research we could in the various archives and libraries available to us. So I think that had we not entered the case, it probably would have taken a different tact, and I think Stan would have concentrated on MJ-12 exclusively. But I think he saw that we were having some success in finding new and additional witnesses. I remember a meeting with Stan, and I always envisioned it in a parking lot. I'm sure we'd been in the restaurant. But when we got out in the parking lot, Stan made a proposal to Don and me, which was his name would go on our book. It would be in third position, and we'd only have to share a quarter of the money with him. And I said no. He'd done nothing to help us, really, and threw up roadblocks so that attempting to block the publication of our book and things like that. So I think that had we not kind of found what we found. Don and I went to Roswell expecting to be able to solve the riddle in a matter of hours. We would learn it was a balloon or it was some kind of rocket from White Sands or something that had been misidentified, and we would go home and that would be the end of it. Bill Brazel changed our attitude when we talked to him, and we realized there was more investigation that needed to be done, so we talked to many, many, many more people about that sort of thing. But I think Stan realized at that point MJ-12 was kind of static, and we had opened up a new area of investigation. so that that he kind of jumped on that. But then a lot of other people jumped on it as well at the same time. So it was kind of an explosion, and I guess a serendipitous point in ufology where something big was needed. And Len Springfield gave the beginnings of it in his crash retrieval presentation to the MUFON Symposium. I think it was in 1989 or 1987 maybe, and some of the other work that was being done that Roswell kind of flooded out of there. And I think that just Don and I kind of pointed the microscope back at Roswell, and other people were able to come in and find witnesses and put out stories and that sort of thing.
But with all the people who are doing investigations around the world on ufology, and I would guess that 95 to 97% of all these so-called investigators are amateurs. Still, with all the eyes to the sky, with all the webcams, with all the night vision cameras, without the, with the groups like MUFON and the other groups, thousands and thousands and thousands of people out there, and still no proof.
There is not the smoking gun.
Yeah.
There's some interesting evidence, and I think we need to look at it that way. And what is your threshold of evidence? What do you need for it to be proven to be extraterrestrial? I set the threshold a little higher than many of my colleagues do.
Right.
Some of them are very satisfied with it, and they tell me that the eyewitness testimony is sufficient because you get all these eyewitnesses. How do you explain the eyewitness testimony? And I'm thinking I don't need to explain the eyewitness testimony because it's eyewitness testimony. If you've got something...
Well, even when it comes to eyewitness testimony, an eyewitness will only give testimony on what he saw based on his level of knowledge of what the object or the incident could actually be.
Absolutely.
So in my opinion, eyewitness testimony, unless corroborated by other evidence that supports the eyewitness testimony, is invalid.
Well, you're talking about chains of evidence.
Yes.
And I look at eyewitness testimony as one of those links in the chain of evidence, and it can set you off in a direction.
Yeah.
But if you have an eyewitness, and then there's radar confirmation, well, then you've got a second chain of evidence.
Right.
And if you've got multiple witnesses and you can pinpoint things a little bit better, then you have a much better case.
But even though you've got radar confirmation of something happening, that does not mean that the witness says he saw a UFO, that the radar evidence wasn't saying, or that yes, it was a UFO. All the radar information is saying that there was something there that was picked up by radar that couldn't be identified.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
And what you really need is photographic evidence to go along with that. And if you've got the thing landing and there's landing traces left behind, well, then you've got multiple chains of evidence and you've got something much more important. We never seem to get to that.
Yeah.
We can get to parts of it. We can get to the eyewitness testimony and the radar confirmation. The Washington Nationals in 1952, for example, you had radars at 3 separate locations, sometimes painting the same objects. You had airline pilots seeing them. You had intercepts, attempted intercepts by military pilots seeing these things. But when you get right down to it, what you have is eyewitness testimony and radar traces. You do not have the next piece of evidence that takes you to the extraterrestrial. Clearly, there was something going on over Washington, D.C. in July of 1952.
Right.
Was it alien visitation? Was the temperature versions as the Air Force claimed? You can't really make the next step into the extraterrestrial because you do not have the next chain of evidence.
With all the webcams, with all the electronic equipment at everybody's fingertips these days, Kevin, it still boggles my imagination that if they are really there, how come we don't have the smoking gun by now? Kevin, you and I have to close off this hour. X-Zone Nation, my guest for this hour, and the next hour is Kevin Randle. And if you'd like to find out more about Kevin, visit his website at www.kevinrandleblogspot.com. I'll be back on the other side of this commercial break with the news as we continue at 6.5 minutes past the top of the hour here in the X-Zone from our broadcast center and studios in Crystal Beach, Ontario, Canada. I'm Rob McConnell. Send me your emails, xzone@xzoneradiotv.com. An interesting conversation with the host of A Different Perspective on the X Zone Broadcast Network, the one and only Kevin Randle.